Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm your moderator, Sara Fuentes with the Transportation Institute, also a Navy League volunteer. It's a great organization, and we thank them very much for hosting us and for planning this maritime-themed discussion today. I'm really excited to talk about this subject, America's maritime strength, and how we can really grow that American maritime power. We are at a turning point for America's maritime future. We all know that the U.S. flag fleet has struggled to grow in an unfair global marketplace where competitors race to the bottom. American flag ships, with the highest safety and training standards in the world, must compete against state-owned enterprises, billions of dollars in foreign government subsidies, and flags of convenience. Though the maritime industry has had some longtime champions in Congress raising the alarm, this maritime moment got a lot of momentum last year when a bipartisan, bicameral group of members of Congress, Senator Mark Kelly, Senator Marco Rubio, Congressman John Garamendi, and Congressman Mike Waltz released their congressional guidance for a national maritime strategy and hosted joint workshops with the Maritime Administration, industry as they started their own work on a congressionally mandated maritime study and strategy on track for release later this year. Following that work, in the fall, a bipartisan, bicameral group of members released their Ships for America Act, set to be introduced again sometime this spring, which would be the most comprehensive piece of maritime legislation that we've seen since the Merchant Marine Act of 1970. Concurrently, the United States Trade Representative has determined that China engaged in such unfair shipbuilding practices that the USTR is considering some strong moves in response. The media has reported on a potential executive order that would combine some of the USTR recommended actions and some portions of the Ships for America Act. We have never seen such united bipartisan support behind addressing these shortfalls in our maritime capacity. This urgency is badly needed, and we all know why. The supply chain crisis following the pandemic highlighted our vulnerabilities in our shipping capacity. And how it also highlighted how China has strategically and deliberately distorted the shipping marketplace so that eventually the whole world will be dependent upon them for the movement of our commerce. Not only that, that would reduce and erode our sea lift capacity in a way that would be very dangerous were we to ever go to war. Our political leaders have wisely seen this threat to our economic and national security in this imbalance. We are joined by an incredible group of maritime experts to discuss how today we are taking a whole-of-government approach to strengthen America's maritime capacity. We are joined by Rob Hurd, the Legislative Director for Congressman John Garamendi of California's 8th District, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Readiness for the House Armed Services Committee, and one of the Ships for America Act original co-sponsors. Rob previously served as the Congressman's National Security Advisor, and prior to joining the office of Congressman Garamendi, Rob served in the United States Army and also worked at the Department of State. We also have David Heller, a senior executive service member, serving as the Associate Administrator for Business and Finance Development at the Maritime Administration at the United States Department of Transportation. Dave is also the administration's chief naval architect. Finally, for a commercial perspective, we have Mark Vaughn, Deputy General Counsel of American Roll-On, Roll-Off Carrier Group, a leading American ro-ro carrier, and Mark is also a retired captain of the United States Coast Guard. And we'll proceed in that order, with each speaker giving brief remarks, followed by questions and some discussions for the panel. Unfortunately, the National Security Council speaker you were expecting could no longer join us, and while we will definitely miss hearing their perspective, I'm sure you'll be satisfied by hearing from our great lineup. And we're gonna have a really good discussion. Let's go ahead and start with Rob. Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to be here with you all. We're very excited for this opportunity, and I'm excited to be here with you. And while I may not be from the National Security Council, I am happy to talk a little bit about the SHIPS Act. So before I dive into that, I think I'll answer sort of an upfront question that we may be unwilling to answer or ask, which is, why is there a former Army guy sitting up on the stage at Sierra Space talking about maritime things? And I'll attribute it primarily to the congressman. The congressman has been an advocate, a passionate advocate for doing more to strengthen our maritime industry across the board for a long time. And from the moment I joined the office, he made the importance of that issue clear. And I think what's really exciting, what's really unique about the opportunity that we have today is the fact that we not only have all of the folks here who are working on it, we have folks on the Hill who are working on it, we have folks in administration, we have folks in industry working on it. This is a unique opportunity that we have today to really continue to do something comprehensive, to do something that brings together the different aspects that we need. It's not just about shipbuilding, it's not just about ship repair, it's not just about seafarers, it's not just about shoreside, it's not just about carriers. It's about how we as a nation continue to have the types of support and the types of infrastructure that we need to achieve some of those national objectives. And I know that depending on where you're coming from or how you're looking at it, you may be thinking about this in terms of a national security issue. Can we build the types of things that our Navy may need, the logistics that we need? Are you maybe thinking from it from a commercial aspect? Are we going to be able to continue to support our nation's economic objectives, our economic growth? Are we going to be able to do the things to facilitate industry? You may be thinking at it from a labor need. Are we going to be able to make sure that we are protecting the workers, the seafarers, the others who are all a part of making sure that this nation continues to run? Because, and again, this pains me as a former Army guy, but I will buy into the argument that we are a maritime nation. That whether it's the inland waterways, whether it's the two big oceans we're surrounded by, we cannot ignore the fact that continuing to maintain a significant maritime presence is absolutely imperative for us. And so I'm really excited to be here and to talk a little bit more about this opportunity that we have. I know the congressmen and senators, the Hill in general is really excited for this opportunity. And for those folks who aren't excited, that's why we hope to talk more with you all and have you all talking about why this is so important. But if there's anything that we can do to be a part of continuing to help this coalition move forward, we're really excited about that opportunity and really excited to get something done.
Thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate it. Dave?
Hi, I'm going to talk about MARAD's commercial shipbuilding programs. I'll start with the Small Shipyard Grant Program. The Small Shipyard Grant Program is a program that helps small shipyards, and small is defined as under 1,200 production employees. And the purpose of the program is to help the shipyards become more efficient and more modern. Basically, what the program has done over the years, was started in 2008, is buy equipment for the yards. So anything the yard needs to help in the ship production process is what we'll buy. We won't do buildings, we don't buy land. Average grant is about $820,000, and this year we have $8.75 to give out. The NOFO is open, and the grants applications are due May 15th. The next program is Title 11. Title 11 is the Federal Ship Finance Loan Guarantee Program. It's a loan guarantee program. It's not a direct loan, and we basically guarantee debt from FFB, Federal Finance Bank. And what it is supposed to be for U.S. owners to build ships in U.S. yards. The benefits of the program are we have the long terms, up to 25 years. We have below market rates, and basically up to 87.5%. We have a lot of money in the program right now, so please, we're looking for applications, good applications, so we can help build ships in U.S. shipyards. The next program is CCF, Capital Construction Fund, and I like to describe that as basically a 401k for ship owners. So it's a way, it's a tax-deferred program. It's a way to take your earnings from income from your ship revenue and put it in a tax-deferred program and take it out when you buy a ship. There are other things you can do with it. Mainly, the main purpose of the program is to help you acquire money to build ships. The next program, which is related to that, is CRF, and CRF is Capital Reserve Fund. And the difference between the two is Capital Reserve Fund is basically the sale of a vessel. When you sell a vessel, you put it in an account, and you can basically do the same thing you did before with that. So that's what that program is about. The next program I want to talk about is our RCM program. Basically, it's a vessel construction manager that we're using to build 5 ships in Philadelphia, the NSMVs. The program, basically what it does is it takes someone that builds ships in the U.S., a commercial entity, and buys the ship for the government. So the government's not the one with the contract with the shipyard. The VCM is. We go through the VCM, and there are many benefits. We'll probably talk about that later. The main benefit is we're not the ones negotiating with the shipyard, and we're not the ones dealing with the shipyard. Someone who does this on a regular basis is the one that's dealing with the shipyard. What the difference is between that, with normally construction, basically we don't touch the shipyard at all. We have to go through the VCM. It adds speed, it takes the risk off the government, and basically we've shown the program works. We've done it once, which means we've only done it once. We need to do it again so we can show the program is viable. It's definitely a way for a new way to build ships for the U.S. government. It's something we think is going to be very useful, and all the stuff that's being talked about now, whether it's icebreakers or just building railroads or whatever it is, the VCM model definitely works. The last thing is we were given money by Congress to start a sealift design vessel to replace the RF ships, and we have completed our concept design. We have a concept design and a cost, so now we can go to the Hill and let them know what we think that cost is, so we can start that process to replace the RF with a modern design that can be built in U.S. yards.
All right, thank you very much, Dave, for that overview of MARAD's programs, shipbuilding programs. Mark?
All right, well, good morning. It's really great to be here. Thank you, Robert and David, for being up here today. And anytime we have an Army guy up here talking about this being a maritime nation, that is already a win, so I'll check that box. And thank you to Sara Fuentes as well. If you're not familiar with Sara, and I'm sure all of you are, she's unquestionably one of the best strategic thinkers and rising stars in the entire maritime industry. So it's truly a pleasure to be up here with you today. Thanks. As Sara noted at the outset, I'm with American Roll-On Roll-Off Carrier in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. And I'm here really just to provide a little bit of the carrier perspective on kind of what we're going through right now and kind of this unprecedented, I'll call it challenge and change, but also unprecedented spotlight on the maritime industry, which I think has overall been very helpful in terms of having the discussion at the right level, strategic level, in terms of what it's going to take to grow moving forward. I'd really like to thank Senators Kelly, Young, and Rubio, Congressman Kelly and Garamendi, and now National Security Director Mike Waltz, who's from our home district, not only for drafting the SHIPS Act and some of the policy coming out, but again, for elevating the conversation about the maritime industry and importantly, our maritime workforce. I think one of the most crucial and important aspects of the SHIPS Act itself is not even so much what is in it, but it's that it's a comprehensive approach. It's almost strategic in its own right in terms of finding the right policy solutions to move us forward as an industry. As many in this room know, comprehensive has not typically been how we've handled policy on the maritime front, particularly in the last 30, 40 years. And frankly, it's kind of why we're in the position we're in right now, particularly vis-a-vis China. Typically in the past, we've handled like a workforce issue over here in this bill, or we'll work a shipping issue over here. But when you do it in that kind of piecemeal environment like we've seen, you end up with a lot of unintended consequences. And I think that's why today we have maybe less than 100 ships in international trade against an adversary that's got 5,500. What I would offer to any policymaker today that's trying to look at policy that's going to grow our industry is to really start with a comprehensive approach that considers whether we have cargo, people, and ships in that policy. And it really has to start with all three, because at the end of the day, if those three things have a very symbiotic relationship, and if you want to move forward, you've got to have cargo, people, and ships all kind of working together, or again, you end up with that kind of disjointed position. I'll start with kind of the concept on cargo. You'll hear our industry talk a lot about this concept that cargo is king. And essentially what that means is increased government and commercial cargo is going to be the fuel that gets us to investment. It's the cargo that provides the revenue that allows us to create the jobs and allows us to go out and procure ships. In fact, to take that a step further, what we really need is predictable, long-term, and stable supply of cargo, which allows us to really start to get the financing in place and to make those long-term strategic objectives. As we talk to people all the time, and the other carriers know out in the room, we buy ships for 30 years. So if every single time you make that strategic investment, you're trying to make an investment against the next 30 years of potential growth or sources of cargo. So again, that concept that we have strategic, long-term, stable, predictable is really what gets us that kind of bedrock that we can grow from. So I would say to any policymaker right now that's looking at policy in the maritime environment, the very first question I would say to ask is, does the policy that you're putting forward create a greater source of cargo for us to spring forward from as we grow our industry? If the answer is yes, it's likely to work. If the answer is no, we really have to think about what is the purpose of that particular policy, and is it going to be helpful to us in terms of how we're going to move forward as we look to expand our workforce, our tonnage, and our shipping. The thing, as we talk about our people in this workforce, the one thing that has become more and more clear over time is, one, we have the best, our United States mariners are the best mariners in the globe today. They're high tech, high speed, high capacity, and they're also extremely highly trained and highly specialized. Fortunately, we've got some fantastic federal and state academies, and we have incredible union training programs that are providing us the capacity we need to move forward. The one thing I would add, again, from the carrier perspective as we build our workforce, is we really have to look at, identify, and remove the hurdles that are in the way, and many of them are bureaucratic. There's a lot of issues still out there about licensing, certification, medical exams, things like that we just plain need to get better. We need to remove those things, and we need to move people faster through the training pipeline. We're still stressed on the workforce front. We still are having ships once in a while, and more frequently than we'd like, still sail short. That's a problem we need to solve, and some of that problem is literally bureaucratic hurdles. I'm from the Coast Guard, so if there's any Coasties in the room, I will throw out one comment to you folks. We have got to digitize and move the entire licensing and ship certification and documentation process into the digital environment. We are still using a paper-based environment for licensing and ship documentation in 2025, and that is the single biggest hurdle I see today with a lot of our workforce. It just simply takes too long to work people through the pipeline. I will say I appreciate Congressman Garamendi and others that are working on getting permanent legislation to half the time that it takes to become an AB right now in the United States. It is literally twice as long as most of our foreign counterparts. It takes over 1,000 days right now to get an AB license, which is your entry level, or a certification, which is your entry level non-licensed crew member, and that's too long. So there's legislation now to half that time. We support that in a big way because, again, that helps us grow our workforce. As we talk, as we do now, we talk cargo, we talk workforce. The last piece is ships. At bottom line, if you're sitting here as a carrier, as I am, we need flexible, timely, and cost-effective options. We really need to look at how we utilize global partnerships. We're enthusiastic about some of the investments we're seeing, like from Hanwha in Philly Shipyard. Hanwha's predecessor built half the ships in ARC's fleet today. So we would love to find options that allow us to work with U.S. yards to take advantage of their partnerships on the global scale to try to start the process of getting tonnage built in the United States moving forward. We can't get here to there overnight. It took us 20 or 30 years to get into the situation we're in. It's going to take us a little bit of time to get out. But there are smart things that we can start doing now as we work together cohesively to look for ways to start moving forward and bring tonnage into the United States. And again, we're really excited about the foreign partnerships because I think we have some of the people coming to the table now who have built some of the ships already that we sail in, and we'd like to be able to leverage some of that capacity globally to continue to bring new tonnage into our fleet. It's highly competitive, and again, we need cost-effective solutions, particularly when we're trying to keep up with China, that, as we all know, is largely state-run and state-financed. Perhaps most importantly, as I wrap up here, we need to maintain our focus on things like the Maritime Security Program, the Tanker Security Program, and the Cable Security Program. These are bedrock areas of law and policy of which our entire international fleet stands upon. So we have to continue to fully fund and fully support those programs that are keeping the U.S. maritime fleet that we have right now healthy, and that's what we are going to need if we want to move forward, is keeping those programs sound as we build from that into more commercial space. So again, tremendous honor to be up here. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Sara.
Great. Thank you all so much for your very thoughtful remarks. Mark, you touched on this a little bit, but I think the reason we're seeing for this momentum that Garamendi has been talking about for years and years really is China and the investments that they're making in their shipbuilding. Can you all talk a little bit about what types of subsidies or factors that they're using to try and how they managed to outpace us so badly?
I'll jump in. I think it's a very important question. I think it's very publicly known, and there's some great reports that are coming out right now that talk a bit about both the disparity in terms of quantity and numbers, which is important in of itself, and also how we got here. I think that we can talk a lot today, if we want to, about the U.S. Trade Representative's 301 investigation. I think it's important to note that when the 5 labor unions that brought that forward, it's not just about shipbuilding, although that tends to be a very important part of the conversation. It's also about how China's role in maritime and logistics. And I think that investigation, when it's looking at those questions of are there unjustifiable, unreasonable, or discriminatory practices, is a really important one for us to have. Because I do think that as the USTR has found, that there are going to be really challenging and unfair practices that have to do with military-civil fusion, which have to do with creating anti-competitive behaviors, et cetera. I do want to caveat that as important as it is for us to identify that reality, to call that out, and to take steps to counteract it, it is also important for us to be responsible in the way that we frame that, the rhetoric that we use, as well as the steps that we take in response. So I do think that it is undeniable that the situation we find ourselves in is not the one that we want to be in. It is undeniable that the BRC has continued to take unfair and competitive or anti-competitive practices to advance its own industry. I think the next part of that question that I think will be likely part of the conversation today is what do we do next? And I think the USTR 301 investigation is a process and way that we can get at it, but we also have to be deliberate so that we don't lose sight of the ball and keep our focus on how do we set our own success for long-term stability, for future, and to continue to grow that in a sustainable and manageable way.
Yeah, I think that's right. You want to make sure, like Mark said, you don't have unintended consequences as we look to build up our own industry as well. But Congresswoman Kiggins earlier this morning really put some fear in me when she said, that China's built more ships in the last year than we have since World War II. So it's a very different. So we're starting from way, way back in order to catch up. It's going to take a lot of investment and all of us pulling together. And part of that, I believe, is also going to be having a national maritime strategy. This is something that Merit has been working on. Congress has directed Merit to do this. And I think we've gotten as far as Merit ever has before. They had a number of war games that Rob, you participated in, which I think was very smart of Merit to invite congressional participation because they're going to be the ones funding this. So we haven't seen the study yet or the strategy, but I would love to hear, I know Dave, you can't answer this, but Mark and Rob, if you could talk a little bit about what you would like to see in that strategy and what we need as a nation and what that strategy can do for pushing us forward.
So the way I would start with that is we've needed a maritime strategy for probably 30 years. We still need that strategy. I know he can't say this, but we need to get it through OMB, and we need to get it out on the street. Because at the end of the day, if we're talking about China as kind of our global adversary here, they've not only had a strategy, they've executed it to a T. And that's what's allowed them to now corner 51% of the current order book. And it's much higher when you get into international shipping. You start looking at tankers and container ships and ro-ros. They're in the 80s and higher in terms of their global capacity right now that they're building. That's not going to get reversed overnight, and it certainly isn't going to get reversed if we don't have a comprehensive strategy that tackles all of the different pillars that we need to tackle together to move forward to try to counter some of the effects that are already there. Back to the USTR, I understand what we're trying to do, but at this point, you've got 250 comments and 230 of them are negative. The unintended potential consequences are astronomical. So again, we need to look at that as we go forward and make sure that we're putting policy in place that doesn't require 2 steps back to get that 1 step forward. And I think that's going to be the most important thing we do now is get an articulated strategy out there, act on that strategy, and then frankly, we need to do exactly what our adversary did in terms of our strategic thought and strategic steps to get out from under where we've basically had 3 decades of malaise.
Rob?
Yeah, if I could just add on to that part of the strategy, I think this is very much so the type of thing that I was sort of referencing in a little bit at opening remarks. I'd also mention that it is a big part of what Ships does as well, is how we think about creating the right structures to ensure that we have a balanced approach to how we get after this problem, right? And I'll be a little bit of a broken record and say, we can't view this as just a shipbuilding problem. We can't view this as just a carrier shipping problem. We have to figure out how all of these things come together. And so while it's really important to hear from the military, we can talk about Transcom and MSC and how much of our military goods are going to be carried by merchant mariners or carried by maritime means. But it's also important for us to be able to talk about what does it mean for our economy if we get squeezed? What does it mean for our ability to ensure that we have uninhibited flow of goods that we need? Do we have the resources to do that? And so I would just, again, sort of re-emphasize that as we think about this strategy, it's not just a defense strategy, it's not just an economic strategy, it's a national maritime strategy. And that means continuing to have conversations like this that make sure we're bringing everyone together so that we can continue to get that momentum to drive forward in a deliberate and thoughtful way.
Right. No, I think that's absolutely right. You know, a problem with shipbuilding is everything gets so siloed. You have Navy shipbuilding, Army Corps of Engineers shipbuilding, Coast Guard shipbuilding, commercial. And so being able to put all those pieces together and really have that predictability and stability, as you mentioned, will get us very far to be able to plan. As you said, these are long-term assets, and so having that kind of long-term vision, I think, will really help bring us together. And it seems like everyone is pulling in the same direction and wanting to have a definite vision for where we want to get to, so we can all the partnerships that you mentioned can bring us there. So moving on, getting a little bit more into the Ships for America Act. It is very rare, Rob, that we see bipartisan, bicameral legislation like this. And these are members that have widely different opinions on many, many other things. So can you tell us a bit about how Congressman Garamendi, your office, was able to pull this together and bring such disparate points of view to work together on this bill?
Well, I'll start by saying that it wasn't just Congressman Garamendi, it was the co-chairs, and it was the team, and it was the fact that we were able to get that team of folks together who all shared, and obviously my boss being a very big proponent of helping to drive that energy, but it took a team for us to really do a very deliberate process. Because I think, like many folks, when you start talking about these issues, we look for the quick or the easy solution. We look for something that we can find where if we just tweak this thing or do this piece of legislation or change this portion of US code, we will be able to solve the problem. And unfortunately, we found out that that does not exist. And if anyone has found it, please let us know, because you could have saved us about a years of work trying to figure that one out. But what I will say is, the way that we get there is by being realistic and pragmatic about what the problem is, realistic and pragmatic about who the stakeholders are that we need to be able to bring together, and then truly earnest in making sure that we are listening to those types of feedback and trying to craft something that is truly executable. This is not just a messaging thing. This is something that we want to see happen because we think it is the necessary steps to take to make sure that there is going to be progress. And I think it helps to have Congressman Garamendi and then Congressman Waltz talking about it on the House side with Congressman Kelly. It helps to have the senators talking about it. And we are at a point now where everyone is interested because we are all hearing about the same problems you're hearing, and we all want to do something about it. So we are happy to have had the teamwork to be able to hear from so many stakeholders, both prior to the initial introduction in December, and then since then, as we start thinking about reintroduction. We're going to continue to have those, but I think it is a testament to the viability and reality of this, that this is not a partisan thing, it's not a House or a Senate thing, it is not a a shipbuilder or shipping thing, it is a maritime industry thing and a national thing that we can all get behind to try and fix this problem.
Well said, thank you. And I will say too, as you know, the staff that has been working on this legislation has been really considerate and very thoughtful in approaching all the different stakeholders across industry, labor, to make sure, and vetting these ideas before you push them forward to make sure you avoid those unintended consequences. And Mark, I know you and I were participating in the maritime industry's congressional sail-in yesterday, where the Ships for America Act was our top ask and request. And obviously the maritime industry has a number of different parts that all have very different priorities. You have shipbuilding, you have maritime labor, you've got carriers, you've got domestic, you've got international. How has the industry been able to come together to support this one piece of legislation?
I think the first part of that is we have an incredibly collegial industry to begin with. Yesterday, I was on the Hill with the president of our union, Willie Barrera, from the American Maritime Operators, as well as labor from Seamen's International Union. And one of the first things a few of the staff looked at us and said is, we don't normally get management and labor coming to us together. And we do that in this industry, and that includes even other facets of our entire maritime trade. And I think if you're sitting in here for manufacturing, shipbuilding, a carrier, labor, one of the reasons that we all come together is when we really look at this at the strategic level, what we're really all about is the assured supply chain security of the United States. And that's really when we're all kind of pulling together for the same thing. We have a country that moves about 90% of everything coming and going on the water. So it's incredibly important that we have our U.S. mariners, our labor, our management on the shipping side, the shipyards, manufacturers, that we're all kind of pulling in the same direction at the strategic level in order to make our entire industry better and stronger. And having those kind of discussions way up here, that is, at the end of the day, this is about our own supply chain security. And on the international side today, we've got less than 100 ships that are engaged in that process on the international side. Obviously, we're doing better on the coastwise and the Jones Act side of things, but all of that together is what's required for us to become a true maritime nation again.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Dave, if the Ships for America Act goes through, we get all these investments in shipbuilding that we've heard from the administration and from Capitol Hill. What are some of the potential spin-off benefits that we'll get from that, from having MARA take the lead in some of this? If we really invest in shipbuilding, could these commercial best practices help improve the Navy or Coast Guard shipbuilding acquisition? Merit has had a lot of experience. You mentioned the vessel construction manager program. Are there lessons learned from there that Merit can share with the other services?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think the VCM is one big piece of what we've learned as far as how we can do things differently from the government. It's not something that we've done before. It's a totally different way of thinking about how you buy a ship. Normally we just buy a ship like a regular contract, and contracts everybody knows is an issue, the way they're set up, the way they run, and the VCM is a completely new model, and it leverages the commercial industry's basically best practices to figure out what they've done well and try to benefit from that. I think also what you'll see is when you go to a VCM, their perspective on who is a potential shipyard for a certain project is much bigger than what the government may look at. So there is a whole lot of the mid-tier yards that will participate that right now are not participating just because they're not thought of. I think the VCM type model will bring those people into it in lots of different ways, and some of the small yards are really good little steel yards. They put steel together really well. So those are things we can learn from them as far as doing bigger ships, as far as how the military and how the Coast Guard and how icebreakers, for instance, how they can be built with a commercial model as opposed to the government saying, this is how we have to do it, this is the best way to do it, when it may not be. I think you'll see a lot of icebreakers do go forward, and the ice pack is a big part of this administration's push right now for what we're going to do with building ships. Building an icebreaker that's billions and billions of dollars is probably not the best way to go. There are lots of ways to get what you need, get them in the water quickly, and that's usually through a commercial model. The commercial industry does this all the time, and we need to leverage that more, and a VCM is one way to do that. There are other ways too, and that's what we have to figure out how to leverage all the commercial best practices to make it easier to buy and build ships, especially for programs that don't usually think of commercial as a solution.
Thank you. And that kind of harkens back to what we heard from Congressman Trent Kelly this morning, talking about commercial best practices, using these commercial yards to help support our Navy, and really getting back to that bigger picture of this need for one unified shipbuilding maritime strategy that can really solve that. And of course, the success of your efforts and what we all and our National Maritime Strategy potential EO will depend a lot on workforce. Mark, you touched on the workforce quite a little bit. I'm not sure if anyone else has any other suggestions for how we should do these investments in our workforce to make sure we are ready to meet these demands that are going to come out of all these investments that we anticipate.
Well, IcePac has a workforce development program as part of it. So what we're trying to do with that is learn from other countries on what they've done, how they've gone through and developed their workforce, and now important is how they maintain their workforce. Because once you develop it and you're basically, shipbuilding is cyclical, and if you have a downturn, you have to keep your workforce busy, otherwise you go somewhere else. You go build bridges, do something else, and it's really hard to get them back. Workforce is something that basically you have to think about long term. It's not just basically training these guys and put them to work. It's how you keep them working over a long period of time to make sure they get better and better, and you do the same thing like you do building ships with the workforce.
Rob, I know Congressman Remedies has worked quite a bit. He's done a lot of, he's been a friend to the mariners for a long time, and I know workforce is also a portion of the SHIPS Act, isn't that right?
It is, absolutely. And it's an imperative part of the SHIPS Act. There's a whole section dedicated to thinking through what do we need to do to continue to build workforce. Because this goes back to this question of if we try and do something very quickly without ensuring that we have the right folks in place who have the knowledge, expertise, and know how to be able to do it, we're going to wind up with a delta there that's going to be very difficult to surmount. And I think the important thing for us to remember is we can and should do a lot of workforce development programs, but we can't build a person with 10 years of experience in 1 year. There is no substitute in that case. It is about getting folks in the pipeline and making sure that we also have the consistent demand support and that we're listening to what folks need and want to ensure that they're going to be able to stay there. So I would talk about workforce development for all the reasons that we have, but also talk about it both in terms of how we're making sure that those demands are there so that we don't see folks leave because they're not receiving the things they need, but also in terms of the opportunity that is presented here. And whether that's Navy shipbuilding, commercial shipbuilding, whether that's mariners, whether that's the folks who are continuing to help make sure that this nation can run, there's a tremendous opportunity there that I think folks want to be a part of. And I think that there's an opportunity for, as we grow this industry, to create a lot of new opportunities for that potential there to sort of inspire the next generation of folks as well.
I think
that's also a big part of workforce is awareness. A lot of people don't think of maritime as a career or a future. They don't even think about maritime at all. And awareness for the industry is a big part of all the stuff going forward to make sure the people sitting on their phones order their stuff, they know how it's getting there. Because basically it's a whole industry and it's a career for people that right now don't think about it at all. So workforce is all about bringing people in, training them, and maintaining them and keeping them for the long term.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, the just passed National Defense Authorization Act actually directed the Navy to do a similar campaign to what they do for recruiting, people into the military services for the maritime industry. And so we're hoping to see the Navy spend that money as Congress wants them to do, and mimic what the other services have been so successful in doing. And what's so interesting, too, about maritime labor is that the more work there is, the easier it is for them to crew these ships. So I think you're really onto something, Rob, when you talk about needing to see that future there. Why would I choose a maritime career if I can't see if U.S. shipping is going down, right? So I think this kind of investment and this signaling is what really helps create that interest in the industry. For the sailing, we participated with some of the state maritime academies yesterday, and they said that they had some of the highest applications they've seen. So your momentum, the attraction that you're giving to this industry, I think is really working. And so it's been really exciting to see. But I think you need that vision for people to see how they fit in order to get there.
Totally agree.
Again, I think it goes back to this comprehensive concept, though, that if we've really got to get the cargo piece right in policy, that allows us to make the kind of investments in ships, because to Robert's point, you can't grow a mariner overnight. In fact, even the most basic entry-level mariner, you're talking weeks to months to even get them on board a ship, and then typically in the 2-year time frame to get them even an AB level license on the deck side. And to create an officer, you're talking about a 4-year maritime academy. So we need that predictable, we need those predictable cargo streams to be able to make the type of investments, because the absolute worst thing we could do right now is bring in a bunch of mariners and not have jobs. That's the blowback we really don't want to avoid. We really want to avoid. So I think, again, thinking about it comprehensively, moving forward with the right investments that allow us to continue to invest in people, because at the end of the day, we are absolutely nowhere. The cargo and the ships will do us nothing if we don't have the workforce that we have today, that we need to build moving forward in order to crew the ships that we have, and as well as on the shore side. So I think the most important thing to foot stomp is anything we can do to shrink that timeline. It's fantastic. Anything we can do to invest in helping people get through that timeline, because that's another issue. It's extremely expensive. And we're competing for a workforce that has a lot of other options. There's welding, there's trucks, there's other things that kids looking for those kind of blue-collar jobs will jump into. And the time to get into those, the barriers to entry are generally lower. So that's one of the things we talk about a lot, is how do we lower our barriers to entry? How do we close down those timelines a little bit? And then how do we attract the young men and women that want to serve aboard our ships today?
Yeah, that's something that the Sea Cadets have been doing. The head of the Sea Cadets actually went through and tried the process to get his mariner credential so he could talk to them about, here's the process, here's how it works. This is for young person. So, when I say all aspects of the industry are working together on this effort, I really mean it. If even the Sea Cadets are working on, here's how we do a credentialing process so we can teach these kids in the future how to do that. You've mentioned cargo is king, and I think that is going to be something that's really a tough piece of that, right? Because it's so dependent on the consumer, it's dependent on the market, and something that came up a lot in testimony at the 301 hearing was this idea of, an exemption for U.S. flag, or even as you're thinking about tariffs, can we do an exemption for U.S. flag as a way to move that cargo onto U.S. flag ships? Obviously, we have not seen that as a formal proposal yet, but it's something we've heard socialized. Is that something that could help move that cargo if we did these kind of exemptions for U.S. flag, whether it's tariffs or 301 or what have you?
Absolutely. We've been saying for a while now that in order to grow cargo, we need to incentivize people to ship on the U.S. flag. Whether you do that through tax incentives, whether you do that through reduced tariffs. I think there's a number of levers that we can look at that would drive cargo towards the U.S. flag. And frankly, we have to find financial incentives that make us competitive. The biggest challenge you have when you're looking at U.S. flag versus, say, China or a Costco, is that they're in a completely state-subsidized industry, state-subsidized building. I think they've put something like $138 billion into their shipbuilding industry, all of which gets into the product dumping and subsidization and other things that they're doing, and they're paying nothing for labor. So, when we're trying to compete head-to-head, we have to find the same kind of smart financial tools that allow us to compete, get onto the playing field, because as I've said over and over again, once we actually compete with them on a level playing field, our workforce and our ships are just plain better. If you get us onto an equal playing field, we win. But right now, the field is anything but equal.
And we may even get to a point, if you have some success in getting your message out, where Ship American becomes just as important as Buy American, right? Where it's something that consumers care about, is investing in this maritime power that we have and really growing it. Another option, too, I believe, is bilateral trade deals. I think in the 1970s, there was quite a lot of interest around that, doing these bilateral trade deals that would prioritize U.S. flag shipping. So there's a lot of options out there, right?
Yeah, and I think if I could just sort of foot stomp something I was saying a little bit earlier, too, which I know is very of this moment, which is that the way that we do this matters, right? It's not just about finding the problem and applying blunt force solutions. It's about finding the solutions that create the right incentives for long-term sustainable approaches to this. And I think that's very much in line with that type of development, because I think the one thing we also don't want to do is we don't necessarily want to, we do not want to lower the standards that we have, right? If our competitors are able to cut corners by taking advantage of their workforce, or if they are able to cut corners by not providing adequate protections, that's not where we want to be. Where we want to be in competitive is having those folks who are the most highly trained, the most qualified, who are able to think creative and come up with novel solutions. And so I would just reiterate that we want to do all of these things, and we do know that the problem is real, but we have to figure out ways that are going to be able to do this in sustainable multi-year steps so that we can try and continue to raise all those different portions together because they are going to be mutually self-supporting.
Something I'd add is, I mean, as it stands right now, the U.S. flag is moving less than 2% of commercial cargo. You don't have to move the rheostat a lot to grow us quite a bit. I mean, when you go from less than 2%, if you went to 4 or 5%, you would bring in a massive influx of investment, people, ships, and cargo. It's just a little bit of a turn when you really consider how little we're actually moving on the commercial front right now.
Changing gears a little bit, here at Sierra Space, we're lucky to be joined by so many of America's friends and allies. And Dave, a lot of them have had a lot of success in their own shipbuilding areas, specialization. China's not the only game in town. They may be eating our lunch in some areas, but a lot of our friends have very strong shipbuilding partners. Are there any lessons we can learn from them in terms of their shipbuilding practices?
Oh, sure. We've seen foreign investment now with Philly, with Koreans. They came in and they have a plan to bring what they've learned in Korea to Philly to help build ships in the United States a lot cheaper. We've seen the same thing in other parts of the country where there are other people want to invest in the U.S. because they see that as a market where they can help grow. They're bringing their knowledge, know-how from where they've developed it from a long time ago, and mostly what they've learned, if you go back and ask them how they learned how to do their stuff, they will pull 1950 production manuals of ship production manuals that we developed, and their basis for how they've gotten to where they are, they've just refined it and made it better to a point where they've expanded it so far, now we need to learn from them of all the things they've done, and they're coming to the United States and willing to do that. We've seen lots of foreign investment in different yards, whether it's Fincantieri or Philly, and it's all over the country. And basically, they're bringing their know-how to the U.S.
Mark, you work with a lot of international companies. You must have a...
I mean, we connect to a global international intermodal network every day. That's how we bring value to our Department of Defense contractors. That's how we bring. That's how we move goods and services throughout the world. So those allied partnerships are critical. I mean, that's why we're excited about the Hanwha-Philly ship combination. I mean, we have allies, we have NATO, we have good friends around the world that tap us into larger global networks, all of which can be positive. I think the caveat to that is that we have to make sure we maintain enough of a footprint inside the United States to be able to do the things that are really fundamental to us at some level. So I think we just have to, again, have a nice, kind of a broad approach to that, figure out what it is that we absolutely have to have, and it's more than we have now, and then we need to be able to branch out onto that from all of these global partnerships that we're all part of.
Go ahead, Rob.
Sorry, if I could just echo that last point. Like, I do think it is not mutually exclusive to do things that will strengthen the American maritime industry while also continuing to maintain the very important and critical relationships that we have with our partners and allies. And I think if you look on sort of the defense side of things, if you want to do the number of U.S. naval vessels, that's one thing. If you want to do the number of U.S. naval vessels plus those that show up to RIMPAC, that's another thing. You want to talk about what our European partners and allies bring, what we get through NATO. There are tremendous opportunities all around the world that we can and must maintain in building partnerships and relationships. And I just want to really reiterate that as we're talking about how we get ourselves healthy, that does not have to be mutually exclusive, that there are ways for us to do both of those things at once. And if we really want to be successful all across the board, those are the things that we have to figure out how to balance.
Well said. Thank you. And very good for our international audience to know that's you're probably right. We don't have to cut everyone off in order for us to succeed. You need somebody to trade with as well. And Mark, I kind of want to circle back to something you mentioned in passing about it's not just these ships, it's this whole intermodal network, it's a global network of systems, because that's part of what the Maritime Security Program brings as well, right? It's not just those ships. Could you talk a little bit more about that whole network that the MSP is able to provide for the Department of Defense?
Well, it's the global logistics network. I mean, I've had this conversation with Transcom before, that, due to the global network that we have in places that, people forget about, we can sometimes move things on the ground in places that DoD doesn't want to fly over. And that's just from having a very, very large, very intermodal, very interconnected network that we can tap into when we need to. And it's worth billions of dollars. That's the kind of reach that we have. That's what your carriers and your logistics organizations bring. Again, it's all based on a very solid and strong United States footprint. Our management is all in the U.S. We're incorporated in the U.S. Our entire board of directors are Americans, but we absolutely have the ability to reach up and out into a much, much broader network that, again, it's worth many billions of dollars, and we can provide that value back to the American taxpayer.
Yeah, I think MSP is a great public-private model, and that's why it's
MSP is a perfect
replicated.
example.
Yeah, that's why you see it
And
for
TSP.
TSP, CSP, all kind of modeled after the success of that program. And I know Congress has been very pleased with it as well, right? It's a very popular program, so it's great. And then, the United States and China are obviously not the only places thinking about maritime. What's been going on in the Red Sea with the Houthis has been really remarkable as we see this return to kind of this choke points and kind of threats to global shipping and the free movement of goods. The Federal Maritime Commission is even looking at these kind of global choke points as well. How is what's been going on affecting what we think about global maritime security?
So I can start with the Red Sea Houthi issue. We haven't sailed through there in a long time.
Right.
I mean, the reality is, I think most carriers now have alternative routing and things just to deal with because, frankly, if nothing else, the insurance rates are astronomical right now in that area. But there's two points I'd kind of make that have kind of frustrated us a little bit from the beginning of that. And one of them, and this is not to disparage anybody on the tactical side, on the Navy, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, but up at the political level, you have to look at the messaging very carefully after that situation started back in December of 23. And what I mean by that is, when we initially rolled in some force, they essentially threw up an umbrella over the whole Bab el-Mandeb and said, we're going to kind of secure this for everybody as best we can. What that really meant for us is that the U.S. flagships and everybody else were sort of on a somewhat equal footing. And on top of that, the message we sent a little bit in the conversation at the global level with insurers and everybody else was, if U.S. ships are sort of the target, and yet we only have sort of the same umbrella everybody else has, were we actually disadvantaged by the policy that was kind of put in place? In other words, it wasn't like we went out and said, we're going to escort and we're going to make sure that the U.S. ships are the most hardened targets out there. We sort of threw up a broader umbrella, and then the conversation at the higher level sort of became, well, what is the actual message here? The U.S. may have actually been the disadvantaged flag in that environment from kind of at the political decision-making level. So that frustrated us a little bit early on. We had those conversations with policymakers, but that's something to think about. I mean, at the end of the day, when we have U.S. mariners aboard U.S. ships, our ships should be the safest in the world because of the United States Navy.
Right.
And we feel strongly about that. Our mariners feel strongly about that. And that's kind of the signal that we want to send to the world, is that our ships are the ones that you should want to ship on in crisis because we're the ones with the Aegis umbrella, so to speak. The second piece of it, we had a lot of calls from the government early on from different sources that said, putting armed guards back on board. That was a great solution during piracy. And a couple of armed guards, great response when you're dealing with a few guys in a skiff and an AK-47. If you saw the Galaxy Leader issue with a combined air-sea assault that came from a nation-state-backed terror group, that is not a situation that's going to be thwarted by a couple of armed guards. So we really need, again, to go back to kind of a more strategic level with the COCOMs and Sixth Fleet and others and say, what is the actual threat here? And we really want to put a couple armed guards on board because at least from where we sat, we thought that might only get our guys killed in that kind of a scenario when the actual requirement might have called for something that looks a lot more like the United States Marine Corps. So I think, again, if we really want to talk about what the threat is and you want to be able to operate into a high-threat environment, we need to take a really, really close look at requirements and have a very different discussion because I'm not sure we got it right.
Yeah, I think if I could also, maybe less on that specific example, but more in general, what do we draw from it? I think this recognition that many folks here know, but folks outside of industry also need to know, which is that these are still wicked problems, right? These are still highly complex systems that we have grown accustomed to being able to rely on and trying to figure out where we need to build resiliency, redundancy, whatever other types of alternatives we need to talk about. I think bringing that conversation back to the forefront of, hey, have we built the system that works, that we've built a system that meets what we have right now, but are we also building the system with the capacity to do what we may need to do in the future. And I think that's an important part of the conversation and lessons learned, is both learning the lesson from the example in particular, but also in terms of shaping how we talk about this issue and make the investments here so that we can be prepared for the contingency that we're not prepared for.
Very good. Thank you guys very much for that. And so kind of closing it up, thinking about the Ships for America Act and this moment that we have to seize, we had the sail-in yesterday to advocate for it. The Navy League will have their fly-in May when we'll be talking about it as well. But what can this audience or others do to kind of show their support and help build this momentum and keep this conversation going after they walk away from this panel?
Awesome. Well, I mentioned at the beginning that the congressman was a major inspiration for me wanting to get more into this field, but I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that another major source of inspiration was my dad, who was a Mass Maritime grad, who sailed for MSC. Like, his story is another part of the things that I think about when I'm thinking about why these issues are important. And the work that you do, the work that everyone here does in continuing to tell that story is really important. But what I would say is, don't just leave the room and have the conversation in terms of the abstract. Go out of the room and have the conversation in terms of the personal, particularly when you're engaging with members of Congress. Help them understand why these issues aren't abstract, but are truly mattering to those who live all across America right now. You don't need to be on a coast for this to be important, whether that's the inland waterways, the economic impacts, the defense impacts. This does touch us all, and I think sometimes it takes that translation and those storytelling to make sure that folks who are newer to the space or newer to the issue can really begin to grapple with it, appreciate it, and understand the importance of it. So
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, expect awareness and communicate. We just need to keep communicating and make people aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we need to think strategically and communicate.
Yeah.
And keep thinking strategically about all the pillars and how we move them forward, how we grow together, and how we continue to be the best maritime industry in the world. And we take that to a grander scale.
Great. Yeah, Maritime's really blessed in that the Maritime Administration is, by statute, a promotional agency. So hopefully we can get some, Ship American branded messaging out there. And when we get new political leadership, I hope they really run with that kind of promotional part of MARAD's mission. Like I said, this is a moment that we all realize has been a long time coming, and we don't want to miss this opportunity in building that groundswell of support. So let's go ahead and wrap up here and get some final thoughts from our panelists. Anything else that we didn't cover that you would like to make sure you share with our audience? We'll start with Mark, Dave, and then Rob.
No, I'll just say thank you all for being here. This is it's a strong indicator that there's a lot of support for our organization. There's a lot of spotlight on our maritime industry, and I appreciate all that everybody's doing across the board to make us, again, like I said, the best maritime industry in the world.
Yeah, I second that. Basically, it's exciting times. There's a lot of things that could be coming that are really fun and really interesting. We just have to do it together and do it as a group. We have to communicate as much as possible.
Absolutely. I'll just echo the thank you. It was great to have a conversation with everyone here. I appreciate everything you all do and everything you all do. I'm really excited for this year ahead. My boss is really excited for this year ahead. We've got a tremendous opportunity here, and we all look forward to working together as a team, as a group, to really drive the ball forward and figure out how we can make this happen. So thank you.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and everything that you all are doing to move this forward. And to our audience, thank you all very much for being here. And we do need your help and your support to kind of help us push us over that finish line. Like as I said at the beginning, this is our biggest opportunity since 1970 to do something really big. And it's going to take all of us communicating with political leadership, with our friends and neighbors about how important maritime is to our national security, to our economic security, to our complete way of life. And so we really need to make sure we make those investments. So please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists and thank them for being here.